All right, maybe we'll jump in. I think folks will continue to join us, but I know we have an hour and no flexibility on the ending of the meeting because we have another building committee meeting right after this. So let's jump in. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It is February 25th. At 6:32 p.m. and we are meeting via Zoom. This is the Reiche Building Level Advisory Committee. I'm going to just go ahead and take attendance myself as we go, since I know people will continue to join and I don't think we need to take up any of our time together going through the attendance. Just a reminder to please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. If you want to speak with the group, have anything to that you want to ask or otherwise contribute so that we can make sure to see your hand because I might not see your physical hand. We have minutes from our last meeting. Are there any questions? And that was on January 28th. Are there any questions or edits, changes, suggestions to those minutes? All right. If not, can I just see by with a quick show of hands all of those who are in favor of approving the minutes? Terrific. Those minutes are approved. And tonight we have a pretty we're, I think, at a very exciting juncture about to, I guess this will be our final, Mark and Lisa and Emily, you can correct me, but I believe this is our final meeting before of this committee, before we send the project out to bid. Or maybe we'll be very close to, so anyway, you can correct me, but we're so close. So, I'm excited to hear the latest. I know that we have updates on the building entrance and some other key issues, the budget and some other key issues that Mark and Lisa will get into. So Mark and Lisa, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you. And thank you so much for leading us tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Emily, and good evening, everyone. Great to be with everyone again. It's amazing. It's already been a month, I guess, since we were last together. And the good news is the days are indeed longer since since the last time. As Emily said, we've got some items to share with everyone, really mostly around the budgeting aspect of the project itself. So there's a conversation we want to kind of just circle back on the conversation on the entrance itself. That the particular, there's two aspects to it that we want to cover. One is we get some great feedback last time and on the proposed sculptural trellis, and we would kind of just recap that and see if we can determine what recommendation might be moving forward. And the other piece is there was some work done with the Reiche Greening Committee to look at saving a wonderful oak tree at the front of the building. And so we've done some reorganization of the layout at the front of the building to do that. And so we have some slides to share on that item as well. We're going to spend a little bit of time going through the budget. That's really kind of the substance of what we've been looking at balancing from not only the perspective of the Reiche project, but also as it fits into the context of the BFOF project, all four projects. And so we'll share that. Give you kind of a quick update on where we are with some of the final steps of a few meetings to conclude as we gear up, as Ms. Figdor said, to really exciting getting this out to pricing for contractors. And so with that, the front entrance, and we don't have any different designs. What we're actually doing right now is we're having the rendering done with without this structure on the front as to assist in really understanding. These are just the quick sketches that we looked at last time, and there was discussion about the scale and the color and the appropriateness of whether this belongs in this area of the city. We looked at it without that. there was some great suggestions about, well, if in either event, is there a way you can create a little more of a welcoming environment by maybe even creating an oculus in the canopy here, and even lightening what this appears to be kind of a pretty heavy slab of a canopy coming forward, and so those are all good conversations, but we didn't really land at a recommendation to move forward. I don't believe. What we did say that we were going to do is go back and find out what the estimated cost of the trellis was going to be, and so we've done some estimating on that, and we anticipate that is in somewhere in the tune of $125,000 to $150,000 for that piece. So that's more than what we originally anticipated that was going to be, but gives you a relative cost of what that item would amount to. And I guess looking forward right now to understand what the recommendation might be to either continue to evolve a design of that in with the idea that there's an additional cost, to have that element there than without it, and what is the desire of, or what's the recommendation of this group to move forward. And so I'll kind of pause for a moment here. I know we had some that were in favor of it, and some that were not in favor of it, and so.
So, Mark, are you looking for feedback given the kind of ballpark of the for the cost of the trellis? That's
right. Yep.
And I don't know if you're prepared tonight, but it might also be helpful for us to look at what to consider it in the context of what some of the alternatives were that we had teed up already.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, because I see Matt Peters has his hand up, but go ahead first.
Yeah, I was going to say we have had some, as we have estimated, and I don't have those prices with us right now, but we can circle back to see what those alternate scope items were that we had identified. I think there were things such as the pre-kindergarten classroom, the connector above on the second floor. There's the reconfiguration and improvement of the kitchen area was also another alternate. So we can report back either by a memo to the rest of the committee on what those alternate scope items were.
Is there any way you could ballpark some of those, just so that people have the context?
Yeah, as we're doing this, I don't know if, Lisa, if you have the opportunity to kind of dig those ballpark estimates up. Yep, Lisa's looking at that, so we can probably entertain questions or comments during that.
That seems really helpful. Matt Peters, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I did. Just in general, I think it's really hard to discuss this without that added landscape architectural comparison. It feels very like this. This image is very hard to react to, and so missing kind of the discussions that you are having with the green team and what ability you are. What you do have to maintain the existing trees, because they are mature trees, most of them, and so that would be really helpful. And then second is just, and I'll echo a comment I made last time, is I did appreciate the desire to have that flying thing, the flying entry be kind of a joyful entrance, and so I do think that there is a way to mimic that joyfulness along the pillar and some other art installations, and we're not getting that in this conversation. We're not visually seeing that, and so it's hard again to really make a full comparison.
Yeah, there's a couple of really good things there. So we actually can we can go through the next few slides, which talk about the entrance landscaping, if that's helpful, and then we can kind of come back to this if we think that would be helpful for this discussion.
Jeremy, do you want to jump in now?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say, I think hearing the, I don't know if other people agree with me, but I feel like the 150 to 200,000 sounds potentially a large amount of money for a decorative item. However, I like the idea of it, so I'd like to see it happen. But at the same time, the building is a very pared down. I don't know if it qualifies as brutalist architecture, but it's a very pared down building, and so I don't know that was. I kind of like the idea that was put out by the last speaker, who said those kind of joyful elements can be brought in other ways, and those can be affordable, and they can also involve the children in making them like they do in the garden and things like that. So I think there's this very thing could work. I think, and it does the job. It's an entrance. It marks it from the street view as an entrance. You would be able to walk up. I know this is very simplified, but you'd be able to walk up, see something like that, and know where you were going. So I think functionally it's not necessary. I think it would be nice if the cost is that much and there's something extra that can be done that's more desirable. But it's, and to the last talker's point and speaker's point as well, I think if we don't know exactly what we're talking about, because we don't have a sort of look and a way that it's going to be, it's hard to say whether it's worth spending on, because we don't quite know what we're talking about. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Mark, do you want to go through the next few slides on the landscaping?
Yeah,
and we can
absolutely.
come back and see if other people have input here.
That sounds great. And so again, this is just for context, the corner of the building that we're talking about, and so as we look over to the left from that along Brackett Street, you'll see the tree that we're talking about inside of a raised planter, and so and you can see the curbing around that, and here's another shot of it right here. I think these must be 6 foot distancing marks on the sidewalk there in the blue. Give you a sense of scale anyway. And so again, it's a great tree. It's a good mature tree, very healthy. And so this is in plan, and I'll be we'll kind of allow people to understand. I'll use my cursor to see. That raised bed right now is in the blue dash line. So, and the mouse is kind of circling around where it is right now. And the tree trunk is right here. And then the canopy is shown here. And the idea that we would do is we would cut the raised bed back to the corner of that entrance right here. It originally was shown cut back to here on that angle. It's now coming out to this corner right here. It'll come up to meet essentially the same edge right here, and then we'll extend raised curbing back to the stair. So so that this whole area will be converted back to a greener space. These trees will be protected during construction. That's what the yellow dash indicates. So that's protection around those trees. And so the pathway, then we're also modifying this planter right here. So this pathway comes up and angles and comes over and intersects the new, calling it an entry plaza. But it's that angle that comes up and invites people from the sidewalk to come into the entrance area right here. And so while the primary pedestrian entrance will be back and forth here, we are providing that cut through right here. This shows a seating bench right there, and similar to what was identified in the rendering a little bit, just a low continuous seat along that edge right there, and also continuing them along this edge right here. The gray area right here shows where the canopy that the trellis is or would be, and so it kind of has that footprint. So without it, it just exposes a little bit more of that entrance plaza. The canopy for the building itself comes off and comes over to here. So this is what is shown if we don't have the trellis. It just goes to the extent of where the mouse is going back and forth right now, and so that in that way we preserve that edge along the sidewalk right here, and then it starts to inflect towards that angle at the entrance itself, and so bring you right up to, but holding on to the beautiful, lovely oak. Any questions on that?
Jeremy, I see your hand up. Is that up from your previous comment, or did you have something else?
No, that's a mistake. Sorry.
No worries whatsoever. Any questions or feedback on this piece, Matt?
Thank you for showing that. This puts it in much greater context. So thank you. I think it's great that the tree is basically acting as potentially that canopy, especially the way the light moves through the sky. That tree will be shading most of that hardscape for most of the day. And so I think the canopy would be a little redundant if we are able to save the tree. I'm worried that the tree protection is pretty tight around that existing tree. So, and it's hard, it'd be hard to do more, but I do think that's something to be aware of, to not dig down too deep when building out. And then just an additional note or question is really just that the canopy that's planned and shown, the smaller canopy, whether or not that interferes with also the tree too. You know, I think obviously the building will, and there's only so much limit we can work around a single tree, but it is nice. It's still infrastructure. So I do like to think of the tree as infrastructure. So.
I think it's a great comment, Matt, and I actually like the way that the to engage, and you don't get that from the simple massing model that was done, that you don't see the interplay between the tree canopy, which actually the tree and the canopy itself soften very much the hard lines of the entrance addition and the building.
Any other feedback or questions about this?
So I don't know if Lisa, if you have some of those figures.
Are we looking for the alternate figures?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what we're, yeah.
Let me pull up. So let's see here. The alternate, so the corridor connector that connects two sides up on the second level, that's coming in at about $140,000. So pretty comparable to what the canopy would be. The upgrades to finishes within the small group rooms within the school is about $60,000. The pre-K, the alternate pre-K location, which is in where the Brickworks area is about $200,000. And the development of the learning garden is about $50,000. And then the warming kitchen is about $560,000.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
Yep.
So given that context, what do others on the committee, or, you know, include, and folks who have already spoken, excuse me, what do you think about the inclusion or exclusion of the trellis? And I see a question about whether we're looking for a vote here. I don't think we're not going to vote per se, but it would be helpful to have more of a sense of the group in terms of the direction. And then I wonder, I guess one question I see I see Leah and Renee have hands up, but one question for you, Mark, and Lisa is, do we have flexibility once we get the bid back to make this decision, or do we need to make it now? Because a little once we have the bid back and we're looking at the hard numbers of what we're really dealing with, there'll be a lot of decisions to make, and we might be able to weigh this decision better when we have all of those details.
Yeah, I think in some ways we could, it would almost be like treating this as an alternate, right? So we would get a price for it, and we could evaluate it at the time we're evaluating the rest of the alternates.
Okay, that's very helpful. Leah.
Hi, thanks, Emily. I was just going to ask, I guess my question was sort of related to that. Could this be an optional thing that we could at some point come back to, revisit later, sort of a 2.0 kind of experience, rather than necessarily having to put it in there. So yeah, that was just my thought. I absolutely agree that conserving that tree and having some more of the natural canopy makes it gives us a much better idea, and makes leaving it off a much more palatable possibility from my perspective.
Thanks, Leah. Renee?
I agree with what Matt said and Leah said, that the appeal of this design with the tree and more greening and not the canopy is a better way to go. Not the trellis is a better way to go. So happy with this design as opposed to the one with the trellis.
So I guess my question, just hearing this feedback, is, do we want to include the trellis as an alternate, or do we want to just move away from the idea of the trellis? Is there anyone who, I guess I am going to put people on the spot, but is there anyone who, really wants to make the case for the trellis, or who just wants to leave it in as an option for us to come back to once we get the bid back and we really can evaluate where we're at and with our budget? Jeremy.
Well, I know I spoke already, so maybe my opinion's obvious, but I would have it price it as an option. I mean, I think if that's not getting a bid back on it, means we have it on the table. But some of those other things were things that looked really desirable when we went over them before, and some of them are affordable with that money. So I agree with the other previous comments about the softening the look, so with the tree and that stuff. So I think that really works, and but I'd still like to know what it would cost.
Mark, is there any downside to including it as an alternate?
No, I really don't see any. I think the degree to which we just complete the documents around the design of it and the contractor prices it. So there's no down. Just look at how it integrates into the rest of it and make it as separable as possible, so that if it's taken, it's not a problem. If it's not taken and wants to be added on in the future, that it could easily do that. So.
Okay, well, I'm getting that that's the consensus of this group, but I don't want to make assumptions. So is oh, I'm muted. I'm so sorry. I was just saying that I think that seems to be the consensus of the group, that we include it as an alternate and can evaluate it later on. But is there anyone who really feels strongly that the trellis really should be more of a core part of the project moving forward? Or are there alternate ways that that folks would suggest we move forward? Because I'll stop there. Okay, it seems like we're in a good place, that there's quite a lot of agreement to include the trellis as an alternate.
Great. No, that actually is very helpful. I know it's been a conversation for quite a while, and it just gives us direction to move forward. And so I really appreciate the feedback and thoughtful conversation on this. The next piece is one that isn't very visually stimulating, but it's a really important part of the project as we get ready to go and complete the bidding for the work. And that is not only the construction costs, but the project costs for the work. And so just a quick history of the project budget. As we all recall, the scenario 1A classroom began about a year ago, and we established these buckets of money appropriated for each of the schools and of the 3 remaining schools, and we've been pretty consistent with maintaining those budgets. And we had a $21 million budget for the Reiche school project, and that $21 million was built on a 25% add to the construction cost. So that's how we arrived at all of them. We actually didn't start with 21 million. We actually started with construction cost, and that construction cost is we'll cover that in a second here. But essentially, if it's 75% for the construction, 25% of that 21 million for the soft costs. Going way back to 2017 is when Oak Point first established these construction costs and total project costs. And at that time, they anticipated that the construction cost was going to be around 13.6 million, and that the total project cost would be around 17.2 million. So that was way back in 2017, and it anticipated escalation to a sort of arbitrary point in time, and it averaged out the escalation for all 4 schools to an arbitrary point, kind of middle of when they all might bid. And when we began the work of establishing the budget for Lyseth and then beginning with the next 3, we put them in a sequential order to establish what those escalation dollars were going to be. And that at the beginning of our contract for these next 3 schools back in August of 2019 is when we sort of said, okay, what are the adjustments that we made looking at the escalation with these projects? At that time, the total construction was estimated around 12.5 million for this work, and the total project was 16.3 million. Again, those numbers were as we realized later, built on some escalations that were much lower than what we actually saw for those escalation values, and that we all had that conversation, painful as it was back when we retooled the scopes here. But the important part of those 2 budgets is that they carry all the line items in addition to the construction that we do have to build into the to the project, and those are really built into 2 different categories. One of them is the administrative fees associated with the project. The other one are the professional services fees, and so we took the ones that the Oak Point provided, and we took the ones that were in the base contract when we began this, and then we reconciled those with our new construction budgets that we had established back in February, March of last year. So as I said, at that time we estimated the construction cost for the Reiche budget to be 15.75 million. So that's the hard construction cost for renovating the building, and we actually had again, a lot of conversation about what that would include. At the time, we wanted it to include more. There was always been this discussion about all other scope, and those scopes ultimately ended up as alternates. And so, but that 15.75 million is what we're tracking as the construction cost. The next line items, and it's hard to see, but hopefully if you've got your slides from board docs or that were sent out, you can follow along. But the other important items are there's a 7% of the construction value that's set aside for what we call FFE, the furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. And that's really to upgrade the furnishings and instructional technology and tell data equipment that is going to be needed in the renovated building. So that's about $1.1 million for those line items. The other items are there's a project reserve which has to fund the review of hazardous materials in the building and other testing that we have to do. And there's also, we're pursuing the leadership in environmental and energy design, and there's a cost to actually certify that. And so the United States Green Building Council requires that you actually pay a fee. So we've got a $10,000 number just set aside for that submission cost built into the budget right now. There's also a contingency, and this is an important line item that we carry in this Part B in the administrative cost and reserve, and that's 10% of the construction cost. So that's 1.5 million that's set aside, and that we typically split it into two different buckets. The first 5% we typically use for a bid contingency, and that bid contingency is there to accommodate any fluctuations in markets or spikes in the bidding climate and contractor pricing that occurs. This allows a cushion for that to accommodate that part of the project. That 5%, we on Lyseth, for instance, we were over the construction cost came in higher than the budget on that. We used that 5% toward awarding the project, and so that's an example of when we used it on that project. In addition, there's another half of it, which in this case again is somewhere around $750,000, and that is for changes that come up during construction. And so there will be unforeseen conditions. There will be other aspects that of costs that will need to be paid out during the construction itself. So that 5% of the construction cost will be used for that. And so those soft costs right there total about 2.8 million. The other soft costs are the architect's fees and the permitting fees, the testing contractor fees. There's project management costs, the folks that will assist Steve and Doug in administering from the owner side, the clerk of the works, which is a position that is going to be eyes and ears to observe the contractor's work during construction. All of those costs are in the category C here, and one of them is called commissioning, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute here. So that totals about 1.6 million there. So the total cost for the project right now is under that 21 million. It's about 20.3 million, and that just is a factor of some of those came in a little bit lower than what they originally were estimated. It wasn't the full 25%. So where the other ones were a little smaller, and so some of these costs are a greater percentage. Because Reiche is a little bit larger, those costs are a smaller percentage. So just under, not by a lot. So we're, again, that 25% when we established is a rule of thumb, and this is just a little tighter estimating on that. Well, the way that filters into the total project budget is if we look at those figures of the construction 10.5, 9.75, and 15.75, which again we have been carrying since more than a year ago, or about a year ago, I guess, right now. Those numbers have been established since that time. The project costs now are built on a more refined review of what all those soft costs are, and so those soft costs are identified in the far right column. And so for Reiche, that 20.3 million is the total project cost. If we add that to the total project cost for Longfellow and Presumpscot, we're at $47.2 million total project. And the Lyseth project cost was 16.8 million. And so the total for all of the projects right now, for all four of the BFOF projects, is budgeted at 64.084 million. So that is right now what we're tracking. And then the bond is 64.260. So right now we're about 175 of a very, very small amount of reserves. But at this point in time, the rest of these numbers balance out. And so that's good news. At the time that we were projecting what the total of the scenario 1A was, we actually were under what the total bond package was. So it's borne itself out without having to adjust the construction costs for any of the three schools. I'll stop for a minute here and see if there are any questions on the budget.
As we're waiting for any questions, Mark, I have a quick question, which is,
sure.
If we are in a position where we're so lucky that we don't need the bid contingency, where does that money typically go? Could we use that for alternates, or that goes, we keep that as in the project contingency line item and have some more flexibility if issues come up along the way?
I'm gonna let Superintendent Patana speak to that.
So ask the question again, because I'm not sure that it's the same question that we addressed at the Presumpscott meeting.
So there's a project contingency. It's about, I'm not looking at the slide now, but it's about $1.5 million. And my understanding is half is a bid contingency and half is for changes that need to be made as we go through the construction process. So my question is, if we don't actually need the bid contingency, and I realize, we're incredibly fortunate, but if the market is okay, we get good bids, we don't need that $750,000. Where does that money, do we keep it in the project contingency, or are we able to access it for alternates and other aspects of the project?
I think the way we've been thinking about it is that if the projects come in below the budgeted amount, that whatever is below that budgeted amount would go into a project contingency, and that the ABC, in consultation with the three building level advisory committees, would make recommendations based on the totality of the different project, the different alternate needs. So, to give you an example, if we were to come in significantly below, we are now in the process of eliminating something that was in the scope for Longfellow that, could potentially, if the aggregated savings from all of the different projects would enable us to do that I'm not saying that would be the priority, because I think that would be the DABC, but we should be giving that consideration so that we can, make sure that we're thinking across the schools as a district, and from the original intent of the BFOF, which was to achieve a certain level of consistency and parity across schools.
Terrific. Thank you for that explanation. That makes a lot of sense to me. Are there other questions on the budget?
All right. Very good. So the next item that we have is a conversation on commissioning. And so Lisa Salwin is going to give us kind of a quick update on what that is and why we've carried, I think it's $65,000 in this budget for it.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you all. So commissioning. Commissioning really is a third-party reviewer that comes in and makes sure that the design that we have done meets the project requirements, and also when the building is being constructed, that the systems that are being commissioned, and we'll go over what those are in a minute, are being built and operating as intended. And essentially, they're making sure that everything is running as efficiently as designed and as efficiently as possible. And so that's through a series of tests and checks and balances. If you can go to the next slide, Mark. There's a lot of benefits to commissioning, and commissioning really covers a series of systems, and we'll review that in the next slide in just a second. But just a quick overview of what that is. We're talking about mechanical systems. We're talking about electrical controls. We're talking about plumbing. We're also talking about building envelope. And so our drawings convey an intent, and making sure that intent is executed within the field. And at the end of the day, you have a building that operates, those different systems operate as intended. You can see the different advantages on the slide. One of the ones that the biggest advantage is that last bullet point there, where it can improve new building energy performance by 8 to 30%. So we'll really see a lot of the benefits and the additions at Presumpscot. On the next slide, these are the systems that are commissioned. So again, mechanical systems, mechanical controls, as well as electrical systems, building systems, and the building envelope systems. Another thing is that they make sure that the occupants are well trained on the systems, as well as the facilities department. So it's really making sure that when we are done, you have a building that operates as intended, and you know how to operate it as it was intended to be operated. It's also a prerequisite for LEED. So we have to do it if we are going after a LEED certification. So it's not only a best practice, but also a prerequisite for that sustainable program.
Any questions on what building commissioning entails, or why we're undertaking it? All right, quiet group here. All right, next is going to roll into a few of the last steps here. As we've been talking about, we're getting down close to the process of sending this out to bid for contractors to price, and we've got this staggered approach where first is going to be Longfellow, then Reiche, and then Presumpscot. So one of the meetings that we have coming up is safety and security meeting, and that's really going to be looking at what we've put in place for building strategies that align with your policies and your procedures regarding the aspects of safety and security in the building itself. So it's systems and practices, and really making sure that those align. It's a similar process we did with the license project, and it actually relates all the way back to when we participated in a I think I'm trying to use the right term, Ted, Lori, and Renee. I don't know if it was stay in place or what we termed it, but that drill where we understood how the building was secured to the best that it could, and really thinking about some of the practices there. So that's really, really important. The other thing that's not shown on here, we do have a meeting with the health partners to just review the layout that's provided for them, to ensure that we've got their needs met as we shift them from the space on the second floor school side to the other side. So that's coming up. And then we have interviews for the clerk of the works. We mentioned that position is hired on to be the daily eyes and ears observing construction and recording it, so that we ensure that the contractor is making the necessary progress on the work and on their schedule, and sort of generally making sure that they're following the construction documents. We have a couple of meetings coming up of importance here. We had a first. This was for those that were awake at 12:05 on Tuesday evening. We had our first workshop of the Longfellow School to seek the board's permission to go to bid. We don't anticipate this one is going to be in such the early hours of the morning on March 2nd, but that's our workshop for this project. And then we will go at the next meeting, March 16th, to go to the final reading of the question and vote on it to allow us to go to bid for the Reiche project. Right now, our next DABC meeting is March 18th, and our next building level advisory committee with this group will be at 5:30 on the 25th. Our schedule for Reiche is the bids are on March 30th, so that will be after our next meeting. So we'll have one more meeting together before the project goes out to bid. And then we'll have about a 4-week bid period to receive prices from the contractors. We're also going through the planning board process to get approvals as well as going through the historic preservation office. And so that work is ongoing, and we've had conversations with the planning department on that. And we also have to submit to the city for the construction code review, or the building permit review, and so that's ongoing as well. And so that's kind of pretty exciting. That again, we're that close, folks, to an improved Reiche, and so that's kind of the steps there, and that is what we had prepared for everyone tonight. So we'll pause here and see if there are any questions that we can answer on the material we presented tonight, or any other items. Hearing none, I'll turn it back over to our chair, Ms. Figdor.
All right, folks. Any last questions? We're getting so close. I want to thank Mark and Lisa and Emily for all of this work. All right, I think we can end early if there aren't any other questions. Do we want to take a vote to adjourn? Do we typically take votes to adjourn? I don't think so. I think we can adjourn. So just to reiterate, our next, we're going to have a workshop. The school board will have a workshop on next Tuesday on this, if anyone wants to join us for it. And then we'll vote on the Reiche project on the school board will on March 16th. If you have any questions or issues before that, please reach out to me. I'm always around and would love to hear from you. And then our next meeting as a committee is on March 25th at 5:30. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to Mark and Lisa and Emily, and have a great night, everyone.